I'm here with Greg Kroleski. Greg, you want to tell us what you do at Databricks?
Yeah, I work on the product team at Databricks, specifically in the area of observability, cost observability, FinOps, that type of thing.
Awesome. What are tags when it comes to cost?
One of the most common things that companies want to do when talking about reporting on their costs is to do attribution. And that basically means know who within the company spent what money. Sometimes they use this to do chargebacks or at least showbacks so they can see, hey, this team is producing this much revenue or this much value for us, and this is how much they're spending. And the way that costs are typically organized with a cloud vendor would be by using tags. And so then you can organize your costs. You can see, great, this team spent this much money, this team spent that much money.
How should organizations begin to approach tagging? Like if I'm brand new organization, brand new to using Databricks or any really cloud provider, where should I start?
Yeah, so tagging is interesting because it really is a bit of a discipline that takes an organization committing to do it, and it's a decent bit of work. Everyone starts out with no tags in place, and if they only have one project on Databricks, they don't really need it. But over time, as their footprint grows, as there's two or three projects, they want to understand what costs were associated with project A, project B, project C. So we recommend every customer go ahead and set up a few different keys right away. So tags at Databricks are key value pairs. You can specify a key and then you can have multiple values. We recommend that everyone set up two keys right off the bat, project and business unit. And most companies operate with business units, cost centers, somehow that they divide their organization. So based on your company, you can make the values specific to the words that you use at your company. Same way with projects. You might have an application or a particular decision, some way that you group projects. You can use projects as the second tag, and now you can start to populate those. One of the cool things we've done in our AI/BI dashboard is when you select a key to look at your costs, not only will we show you all of the values, we'll group the costs by the value, we will also show you the percentage coverage you have. So we can say, hey, on this key, you've got 98% coverage, meaning 98% of your costs have a value associated with that key. So for example, project, we could say 98% of your costs have a project attributed with them. That's great. 98% is an A plus. Often customers start off much lower. It starts off at 0% or only a few things are tagged. And that's when your goal is really to say, okay, what do I do to get myself more coverage so that I have more complete cost reporting?
What do you think is the biggest challenge when trying to incorporate tags?
Tag management can become a very complicated thing. I've seen very large organizations with tens of thousands of users set up tagging on their cloud environments and across multiple different vendors. And it can become to the point where you actually need a third party tag management solution to help organize it. But it doesn't have to be that complicated to start. To start, you can just say, hey, let me put my projects and business units and start recording things, get that sort of populated, and then see if that answers our questions or if we need to apply more tags that are more granular. I mentioned you might have three projects on Databricks, and your first goal is to understand the cost in Databricks of each of those three projects. From there, you might want to drill a line deeper. And so then you could apply another key value pair that's more granular. And so you can drill in even further. And the nice thing about tags is you can add multiple key value pairs. And so the work you do to break it up into the first three projects doesn't go away if you choose to add more tags. You can keep that there and then add something else. So I'll see folks start to eventually apply different tags. They might put environment for development, testing, prod, etc. Then they might put something more specific. They might even tag users or groups of users if multiple teams work on a particular project so they can subdivide. We actually do the same thing internally at Databricks. I like to understand for all the things the money team is building, what we're spending on providing those features to our customers. And so we break down our costs kind of very specifically so we can see, hey, our own data pipelines that run on Databricks to produce the cost reports for customers, how much are each of those costing us? across regions for particular pipelines, etc., so we can understand where there's room to become more efficient.
And I would say one of the challenges that I see sometimes a few challenges on my end when it comes to implementing tags. One of them is that, yes, it's very easy to iterate and come up with new tags, but generally speaking, tags are not retroactive, right? So you might do some work here and that's forever, kind of forever stamp, and you can remove them in a BI layer, remove the tags that you don't really care about. But if you were to come up with this tagging strategy right now, you would have to do a lot of work to add it to your BI layer to say, hey, in the past, this resources really, this was this kind of usage or this kind of usage, which can be a little bit impactful when it comes to looking at history. So the other challenge too that I see is sometimes getting the right level of granularity is very, very tricky. Like meaning like ideally you want to tag as granular as possible, but it can get very tricky. Now, I'm curious, what are your thoughts as what do you do? Let's say I have a workflow that is touching on multiple points, multiple, say, sources of data, for example. And I want to actually be able to allocate the cost for processing each of those sources, but I have it all in one single workflow because it's just more efficient from a cost standpoint. I'm curious as to what you would do.
Yeah, so there's 2 points you made. One is about sort of tagging and completeness, and then the other is about granularity. Let's drill into both of those. You're right, tagging is very hard to do retroactively. The way it works at Databricks is you put key value pairs on things, and those we append them to the cost records or to the asset itself, and you can look that up using system tables. But it's not something you can do retroactively. And so I always recommend people get started by applying tags. The nice thing is if you apply too many tags, you can always ignore that key later. If you don't apply any tags, you're kind of out of luck. You'll have to sort of manually do that later in a BI later or something. And so it's always better to start with putting some key value pairs in place. And, later you can say, hey, actually, I don't care about that one, and you can just ignore it. And that's why we recommend business unit and project to start off with. Environment and team are sort of number 3 and 4 that we see. And these are very common. So if you're brand new to tagging and you can only do one thing, and if you're just getting started on Databricks, set up those 2 keys, business unit and project, and start tracking things. It'll help you in the future when you have that information in there. So the second thing you mentioned was about granularity. I think in a perfect world, a picture like a 2x2 axis, and on one side of the axis is granularity, and on the other side is effort. In a perfect world, it would be really low effort, and you'd have really high granularity, and you'd also have high completeness. And now you're not spending much energy, but you're having everything tagged at a super granular level so you can slice and dice on reporting later. In reality, you often have a trade-off. Things that are highly automated aren't as granular, they aren't as specific, and when you want things to be more granular, there's some manual process. And I'll give you an example. You have a data worker that works on 2 or 3 different projects. How are you going to know when they're working on this project versus that project? Well, you could ask them what they're doing, and that would tell you, but that takes a manual step, and they might make a mistake. And so, automating that stuff would be the ideal world, and having that granularity. And that's a difficult challenge, but it's one that we're looking into at Databricks. Right now at Databricks, you can mainly tag on the compute layer, so clusters and warehouses. You can also tag jobs, and we are looking at introducing more and more places where you can do tagging. One of the first ones is on serverless. You can use budget policies to apply tags to groups of users. So when that user conducts an operation, it's tagged with the tag that's applied to the policy they're using. So the really nice thing about serverless also is that it's very granular because it's sort of ephemeral in nature. And I'm talking serverless jobs and serverless interactive. We spin up the compute and then spin it down just for that one workload. And because of that, we can attribute that cost to that specific user. That's a little different on Classic, where there's a cluster running and there might be multiple users. It's a shared compute model. If you tag the cluster, it's harder to drill down. Now, we are also working on that problem. If you use our DB SQL product, you might have seen the query history system table, which lets you understand each query and the runtime on that. Using that, you can sort of get more granular on costs, and applying tags to that is a path that we're exploring. And so being able to go down to the operation level is something we want everyone to be able to do. It's easier today using serverless interactive, serverless jobs, but it is something that we understand everyone wants to do across all products, and we believe that's what the future looks like.
Yeah, and I would say ideally too is even looking at the task level attribution. I think it's a big thing because in the past I've built solutions that addressed the granularity problem. And I usually would create methods, right? Like one was like, hey, this is a perfect attribution. I know I'm attributing dollar to dollar performance. Then I want to have like, hey, this is one that the methodology is, let's say, 80% accurate. And the other one's like, hey, this is just an evenly split cost across everything. And that's what I've done in the past. But yeah, being able to be able to better attribute cost when abstracting the need to actually say, oh, well, I need to build this solution on top of it. I think that's something that would be very helpful to people.